Well, an inquiry into cults in Victoria has led to some shocking allegations against the City Builders Church. Revelations by my next guest tonight include claims of gay conversion therapy, rape victims discouraged from going to police, and demands they don't have an abortion if a pregnancy results from those rapes. To find out more about this shocking story, I'm joined by Clare Heath-McIvor, who gave evidence at that inquiry. Clare, welcome to McKnight Tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the City Builders Church is actually run by your father, Pastor Brian Heath. You call it a cult you grew up in. At what point did you realise you were in a cult?
Oh, isn't that the million-dollar question? I think when people think of cults, you often think of people that have been, recruited in or radicalized
Mm.
in. But for the majority of us, we actually grew up inside or were recruited through someone we love. And 63.4% of respondents to the parliamentary inquiries questionnaire said that. So for me, it was my entire world. I was homeschooled. I was socialized almost exclusively with people from the church. I was, this was
It
just
was
my life.
life.
It was just my life. So over the years, you have moments where something peaks and you go, what is this? Nah. And then you squash it down because this is everyone you love. It's your whole social circle. For some people, it's their jobs. For others, it's where they live and worship and socialize and, live, work and play. So for me, it was all three. So
Well,
it took until my mid-20s. Actually, this is just a really long, long answer to a short, short question. But, I got out at age 32.
you have all the time in the world. Was there a turning point? Well, let's talk about this. You were forced into a marriage, and you say this was part of gay conversion therapy. Was this your turning point? Did you know you were marrying a gay man?
I think forced marriage is the wrong word to use here. In city builders, like in a lot of other churches, marriages are suggested, heavily suggested, or, there's this whole idea that you have to save sex for marriage and that God hates divorce. And within our particular sect, we had to submit our carnal desires, our crushes or whatever, to dad, and he'd pray about it, and then he'd tell us whether or not God thought it was a good idea, and then we would either pursue that relationship or we wouldn't. In Patrick's and my case, he had been through conversion practices, so not just conversion therapy. Therapy, we think of a counselor sitting down with
Yeah.
somebody and teaching them how not to be gay. That actually just doesn't happen in any ethical therapeutic setting anymore. We do have grave concerns that still goes on underground in many groups, but conversion practices, change or suppression practices, it can be everything from casting out demons to prophesying straightness over a person, to prophesying over them that they'll marry a certain person or they'll have kids or this will be their ministry. A lot of pastoral care, a lot of preaching against, all of that sort of thing. So it creates this ecosystem around a person where they learn to hate themselves. So they learn to internalize that homophobia, and that's what the Change and Suppression Practices Prohibition Act from 2022 really addressed. But yes, I was in an arranged marriage. I could have turned that marriage down, but I fully believed at that time, something I know to be false now, is that homosexuality was something you could cure. And we know it's not. It's not something you can cure. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly great. But yeah, I unfortunately I was not a magical virgin. I was just a regular old virgin, Rob, and I didn't turn anyone straight. It's as disappointing to me as it is to everybody else.
I love it. But okay, you weren't forced, but I think it would be fair to say you were manipulated. Your whole life sounds like a
Yes.
manipulation.
Yes, that would be fair to say. It wasn't my marriage that was the turning point for me. There'd been moments over the years that had been horrendously difficult, but on the day in question, it was actually the day I found out I was pregnant with my son, our son. It was I'm sorry, I'm going to mention miscarriage here, but it was the fifth pregnancy in 1 year, and I'd had four consecutive losses. And I remember being so thrilled that morning when I'd, got this news that I'd been waiting for. And we'd been doing it hard, my husband and I, and my dad, I'd said, Patrick could use a pastoral care visit. And as Dad was walking in that day, I was driving out of the driveway going for lunch with friends, and I thought, oh, why does he look like he's about to, like his shoulders were up and his fists were clenched? And I thought, that doesn't look like a pastoral care visit, but I opted to go out for lunch anyway. And when I returned, my life had changed. They'd had an argument. My then husband had raised some concerns with my dad about specifically the handling of mental health and of abuse allegations, including abuse allegations regarding me, about things that I'd gone through. And that day, the process of our shunning began. Social invitations dry up, you're getting dropped from rosters. I'm starting to hear rumours about, oh, you know what Claire's like. And I was like, hang on. I wasn't even there. So, the slander and the defaming starts, and the talk of, oh, she's crazy or things like that start. It's a very common tactic used, especially with women trying to escape cults and high control groups, is they'll attack them as being too emotional or being unsubmitted or being a Jezebel or that sort of thing. I wasn't even there at the first conversation. I just tried to broker the reconciliation, but there it was. And then there was no option to go back. We couldn't. It was either come in under complete subjection again, or it was on your way. And Dad just kept on saying, you're free to leave. And I was like, I don't want to leave. I want to stay. You're free to leave. You're free to leave. And I was like, oh. So
That's a test in itself.
Yeah.
That's any doubts you might have. That's him basically forcing the issue and forcing you to make a choice. Can I just say something here?
Yeah.
We've invited you here. You don't
Yes.
need to apologize for your story or for what you're saying.
Absolutely not.
No.
Although I'm sure some people would rather I
There's been
did.
multiple times in this interview where you've apologized, and where does that come from? Does that come from this from your life in the church where you always had to apologize for who you were?
It's really funny. I've never noticed it. But yes, generally, if you are not in complete alignment or complete subjection with what they call covenant, or if you're not living in complete obedience, then you're apologizing to try to keep your standing in the group. And I will admit, Rob, that today has been a day in which a bit of stuff has happened on the cult scene. Myself and my fellow advocates, we get some harrowing calls. We get some harrowing messages from people that are in situations that are unthinkable. And
These are people in cults?
yes, especially since the inquiry, because there's a few of us on TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm on, we've got our website for survivors of coercive cults and high control groups. We make sure that we're visible enough for people to find us, but when people do, their stories are harrowing, and you sit with this, and you have to kind of draw this boundary with your compassion, because you're like, this is not my story, this is somebody else's story, but their echoes are so familiar. It's no matter what the transcendent belief system is inside a cult, and that's whether a cult is philosophical or pseudo-religious or, yoga cult or MLM cult or whatever it is, the tactics that are about sustained, patterned, cumulative, coercive control and total domination, they're so similar right across the board. So we deal with this every day, and you've got me on a day where I've had no less than 4 different cases come across my desk. And this is not a paid thing I do. This is a grassroots movement. Survivors of coercive cults and high control groups, we started the Victorian Cult Survivors Network to get a genuine community movement, genuine community co-design behind our Beyond Belief paper, our recommendations paper to the parliamentary inquiry. We're working with Stop Religious Coercion Australia. The stories are harrowing, but of course it does hark you back to your own stories, and you find yourself doing things like saying sorry excessively in an interview. So,
You can
yeah.
say sorry. I'm not going to pull you up, and I don't want you to feel bad about it. I just want you to know you're safe here, and you can say anything you want. It really isn't a problem. That's where I'm coming from.
You're not safe, though, because cults like to threaten for defamation.
Uh, they can come
Who
after
says?
me.
Well,
You
you've been
can't
warned.
take what I don't have.
Amen to that, brother.
um, on that serious side of those people coming to you, sex is often a big part of cults. Now, you said you were a virgin when you got married, so I'm assuming, but maybe I'm wrong because there are different levels, of course. I'm assuming you weren't a victim of sexual abuse, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But sexual abuse is a big part of cults.
Yes, I don't think I was. There was some abuse that happened in another sister cult that I've been asked whether that was sexual abuse, and I've kind of said, no, I don't think it was. It was definitely awful, but I don't think it was sexual abuse. If that case went to court, maybe that would be different. Maybe that would be found to have, an element to it. But
And
I
also, what
don't.
we consider sexual abuse today has changed from even
Yeah,
10 years ago.
yeah. So, um, you know. That's a whole thing, but sexual abuse is it's rife. It's I think 52.4% of people said that they'd suffered some form of physical or sexual abuse inside cults. So that is massive. But somebody said to me the other day, "Do you consider an arranged marriage to a gay conversion therapy survivor to be sexual abuse by proxy?" And I went, "Oh Lord."
It's an
And then
interesting
probably,
question.
yeah. So I think, while my story is perhaps a bit complicated, there are so many people who have these stories. And the ones that really irk me are the ones I've heard over and over again. I reported my sexual abuse or I reported my rape. And this is not just city builders, okay? There's only been a couple of cases in city builders where somebody's told me of having reported a rape. But in other churches, in other alleged cults, people have said, I reported my rape or my sexual assault. I was forced to marry that man. I had in one case that guy then went and offended against his own biological child, and that when that woman escaped, like these stories are just awful. And it's really beyond the pale when it comes to um, what's acceptable in society in any level. But the issue with cults is not that um, that sexual abuse is illegal. It's that the system is used to cover it up.
Mm,
It's
And that
not.
coercive control of saying, well, I mentioned it earlier, you can't go to the police. If you have a baby out of rape, you have to have that baby. And on the City Builders Church, let's go back to that where you grew up on. Does that
Yeah.
church believe it is above the law?
We heard regularly that the government of God is higher than the government of man, that the wisdom of God is higher than the wisdom of man. We were talking about bringing heaven to earth. We were talking about crossing over to take over, to take dominion in every domain. We were very much political in this. We believed that our morality was God's design and that we were to bring that to earth. So yeah, like they wouldn't say we're above the law, but they'd say the law of God is higher and we obey the law of God. And that sits in this interesting space called
Mm,
epistemic abuse where they're splitting hairs, but they're getting in a certain direction. Whereas there are some other cults that are full on doomsday, that are full on,
yes.
anti-authoritarian. The Sit movement is a really interesting one because it may seem like it's disconnected and discombobulated, but behind the scenes, it all really does connect together into this transcendent belief system with some serious, some significant figures that you could argue are those cultish, sort of central or narcissistic characters. But having that transcendent belief system is another aspect of a cult. And in the sovereign citizen movement, that's quite
Well,
anti-government.
that's its whole other cult, isn't it? A different kind of cult. But
Mm.
church and faith groups like the City Builders Church, they are contesting the inquiry's broad definition of a cult. Now, they clearly feel threatened about it. Where do you stand on their objection? Because they're not they don't seem to be doomsday cult people, but you said
No.
yourself, they feel like God is a higher power than the law.
Yes. So, and it's interesting, in my hearing, I actually mentioned a quote from Scott Morrison from when he lost the election and he preached at Horizon Church. And he said in this one particular clip, we don't trust the government of man, we trust the government of God. So this is a throwaway line that gets repeated throughout a lot of evangelicalism, but it's these fringe groups that can really apply this coercive persuasion, this coercive control to really indoctrinate people into a more harmful, more fringe version of this. Look at how this might damage a person over the course of time. Now, the data that came out in the questionnaire release, 95.9% of people reporting psychological damage.
Yeah.
Something like 86 or 87% of people are reporting significant limitations on their personal freedom. This includes finances, sex and sexuality, choice of partners, all of that. 52.4% of people saying physical or sexual abuse. This is not okay in any setting. So what we're saying in the Beyond Belief paper is keep belief out of it. Freedom of religion is sacred, but freedom of religion is not, nor will it ever be, freedom to defraud, exploit, abuse, or deceive. And we're not looking for, this group preaches heavily on tithing. We're looking for, hey, are they surveilling your spending habits? Are they looking at your budget? Are they looking at the spreadsheet and seeing whether
Are
or
they
not you
controlling
tithe?
you?
Are they controlling you? We're not looking at whether or not somebody says, I want to take a vow of celibacy. We're looking at them and saying, are you coercing a person into rejecting their own sexuality and trying to be different to who they are? Are you trying to get a person to suppress their belief, personality, presentation? Are you controlling how they, access information, how they're educated, what they're reading, what they're watching? Are you using different elements of coercive persuasion? Are you using group dynamics against them? Are you being deceitful in your recruitment? I hear a lot of people say, we should be caring for children in cults, but whatever consenting adults do is up to them. The thing about consent in cults is it's not there. You might have consented to go to a barbecue with some lovely people, and the barbecue isn't the coercive act. It's what happens next. It's how they use love bombing, and they use flooding the zone, and they use isolation from family, and they use, this is our higher truth, our transcendent belief system. That's how it becomes grooming, and that's how it becomes cultic. I went to a wonderful church after exiting City Builders. Of course, it's been accused of being cliquey and all these different things. Every church has got its lurks and jerks, but they had a lot of jerks, let me tell you. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Every church has
It's
got
good that
its
you can laugh about it all.
Oh, if you didn't like the gallows humour that keeps the survivor groups
Yes.
afloat, I swear it's you'd have us committed if you looked at it, but don't have us committed. But this church that I went to had such clear transparency lines. They went over and above with their financial reporting. They went over and above with their child safe procedures. They went over and above with making sure that you knew if you had a grievance with the pastor where you could go. They had a board that was legitimate in its ability to hold him accountable, and it wasn't a fake sort of accountability that was just there to greenlight the boss. It was a really beautiful, I would say healthy community. And I'm still in contact with some of those people, whereas I'm in contact with nobody who is still on the inside of City Builders.
Well, that actually includes your sister, doesn't it, Renee Heath?
Yeah.
Because she didn't leave the church like you did. In fact, she's come under the spotlight for her extreme views after contesting and winning an upper house seat in Victoria. What do you make of her political career, and should the electorate be worried?
I'm not here to talk about her. I think I've said enough on the public record in the lead up to the election to, wave the flags of concern there. What I can say is that many of their doctrines, one that was common then and it was still up on the website a few weeks ago. It's probably been scrubbed now, but preaching about being as one man, about being, honouring and being in one accord and being as one man. So that doctrine for us was wherever you go, you take the word of the Father, you take the word of the house, you take the spirit of the house, you represent us, and we represent God. So that was the heart of that message. And yeah.
It's funny. It didn't occur to me that talking about your sister would be a trigger for you, and so I'm obviously not trying to upset you.
It's not a trigger per se. It's just out of respect for democracy, and out of respect for the fact that the person that I want under the spotlight for inappropriate influence over people's lives isn't her. So that's difficult. And when I say respect for democracy, the criticism that we had in the beginning is that she wasn't elected via, she wasn't elected via popular vote. She was number one.
She wasn't elected on her values.
No, she was elected because she was top of the ticket in the safest seat in Victoria. And after Ed O'Donoghue's retirement from that seat, it had gone to an interim thing that the committee, the state council had voted on it.
Yeah, she was guaranteed to win.
Yeah, but she got it by one vote. So 55 to 58, Catherine Burnett-Wake took it in the interim time. 55 to 58, Renee took it the second time. So it was that slim a margin, and values weren't really a discussion, and there wasn't really scrutiny. She wasn't really fronting up and saying, this is who I am and what I stand for. Yeah. And so that's, I understand that would have been pretty distressing for them, the estranged sister fronting up on 60 Minutes, leading a bunch of other victims. And I get that. It's awful.
Well, you've made an interesting point. Your story is not her story, and her story is not your story.
Correct.
But you have a right to tell your story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do what I do not because I want to. My goodness. I'd rather shut up about this. But if you know that conversion practices are going on in a church, if you know the statistics on what that does to the mental health of a young person who's exposed to that, if you know that there's like homeschooling, which I equate with educational neglect. I had several significant injuries when I was a kid. I didn't have normal medical care. I had a dislocated shoulder for 10 years. It was just like growing out of socket. But we'd pray for this pain, or we'd get this pastor to massage it in the basement. Things like this that just, they're neglectful. And I'm a pretty mild case in the grand scheme of things. Sure, I was coerced into a business. I lost a whole lot of money selling up to get out of city builders. I was in an arranged marriage with a gay conversion survivor. There's been a lot of things that have happened to me, but I am not the worst story I've heard, not by a long shot. When you step into this space as an advocate, the stories that you hear, every single one of them is the worst one you've ever heard. And I think it's been a bit shocking to the committee to hear just how bad it is.
Well, look, Claire, it's important people like you speak up. I really do appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on McKnight Tonight.
My pleasure.
And
fun, insightful interviews from a washed-up producer with nothing to lose. McKnight Tonight, McKnight Tonight, McKnight Tonight. It's good night from McKnight Tonight.